Jason's favorite place is in Dollywood with his family. And as you just heard, we are recording this video. At any given point in time, Jason's likely to be the biggest Dolly fan in the room. If challenged to a pop culture trivia showdown, he would likely lose, but he could win any Southern gospel pop quiz. And unless your Golden Girls knowledge is on point, don't bother inviting him to that duel. Most importantly, his knowledge about how to monetize your chamber or organization's non-dues revenue is second to none. Joining Jason today is our very own Anissa Starnes. Welcome, Anissa, and Michelle Trice. They will be handling questions, and Amy and I will also be trying to keep an eye on the chat. So thank you for joining us today, and take it away, Jason.
Well, it's so good to be with y'all. Thank you. Yes, second webinar of 2022. Who knew 2 years ago that, these would become kind of just the normal for us. And it's good to be back with you. I know we were together in 2021 and shared some thoughts. It might have been 2020, the last couple of years. If it's anything for y'all like it's been for me, they've just kind of blurred all together for sure. So, but today, they have asked me to come and talk about what we do day in and day out. And as a former chamber exec, it's interesting to kind of take chamber and kind of break it down into the pillars of what makes us operational and what makes us successful and those type of things. And I have been fortunate now for over a decade to really hone in on chamber sponsorships and kind of how to monetize those a little bit better than maybe chambers have done, just kind of always doing it the same way. And of course, doing that, it gives us the privilege of being coast to coast and kind of top to bottom of the states and looking at chambers and learning a lot of new innovative things that chambers are doing via sponsorships and kind of putting those all together and kind of creating a baseline for you. Today, our title is Developing Strategic Sponsorships. And I think that middle word there is absolutely the key as we look into sponsorships. Because honestly, sponsorships are nothing new. If we've been around chambers for any length of time, and if we came to the chamber world from additional professional organizations, or maybe we were working in a business, we were surrounded by nonprofits and they have sponsorships. So that is nothing new, but I think the way that you begin to look at it in your chamber is how really the difference is going to go. Really, as we kind of are still in the COVID aspect and the COVID overlay of life, some communities different than others, depending on variances and such. And who would imagine 2 years later, we're still thinking about that. And as we kind of look back at it, I don't know that we've come out of it enough to really kind of put a starting point and an end point to it. I don't know that we will ever have an end point to it. But when it has that aspect of sponsorships, what did we learn from this time? And how can we kind of set a different foundation for sponsorships going forward that we might not find ourselves in maybe a predicament that we did in 2020? And some of that information is kind of coming out and coming to fruition that we can kind of begin to analyze it. And what I would say, what we've really kind of had a lot of inquiries about over the last couple of years is how have sponsorships changed? What's looking different, and how does that work? And what I would say is, honestly, in my opinion, in looking at chambers, sponsorships haven't changed all that much. The way we look at them might have, the way we rely on them might have, but the sponsorships haven't changed. What I truly believe is that the sponsors have. And so if sponsorships are what we take to sponsors, then we have to figure out how to make something that really hasn't changed, how to get it to people that might have changed and businesses that might have changed. And so hopefully today, as we kind of spend an hour here together, as we kind of wrap up this session, hopefully it will give you a different thought in how to look at your sponsorships. And what I would suggest to you is really in starting the process of looking at sponsorships, I think truly what you have to think through is, what are you doing? Do we get on this hamster wheel as chamber professionals and thinking about sponsorships and what they're going to do for us? And I would say that more often than not, we do. We just kind of perpetually do the same thing over and over again, thinking through not necessarily that we don't want it to be different, but we just get so bogged down in the day-to-day operations of our chamber, especially in the last couple of years, as our businesses have looked to us to be the conduit of information, and maybe our strategic role in our communities have changed. And so as we're looking at some of those newer things that we're doing and maybe how COVID has applied to our business organization, really sponsorships kind of take that back burner. And so we just grab what we known has worked. We might polish it or maybe turn it around, maybe try to make it look different and put it out there. But effectively, we're doing the same thing over and over again. And I would tell you that when we are talking to chambers and when we're looking at their sponsorship inventory and what they're offering and to the programs, initiatives, and events for which they're offering it, we see a lot of that aspect, that there's the passion and the desire there to do things a little differently. But how can we do that with the organizational aspect that we get? And so what I would tell you for that is I believe the difference is we have to set time. That nasty four-letter word that we don't necessarily like to say because we need so much more of it. But I think that there's a structure to your organization that you just have to take time to plan and to execute. What I would share with you in that particular process is what we try to share repetitively to chambers all across this country, that you are effectively a business. It is what you are. You're not an organization. You're not a non-for-profit. Those are just tax statuses, but actually you are a business. And so when we look at ourselves that way, and when we look at our business members and maybe other businesses that we emulate, what we know is that they take time. It seems like we never have enough. And when do we do it? And, are we forsaking the nearer future for the long-term future by not giving the time for it? But sponsorships are more than just that transactional item that we are looking to put into our budget. It truly can be strategic in helping us get to where we need to go. And so part of that time is setting goals and making a plan for sponsorships. What I would ask you today is, do you have sponsorship goals in your organization? Now you might go, well, that's part of our strategic plan, or, our strategic plans here, we really haven't thought about sponsorships in the way of goals. How would goals look? What kind of sponsorships do you have? Or, the immediate response to the question of, do you have sponsorship goals is, of course. We expect our budget to go in an increase this way, or we've set forth that out of these programs and events, we're going to increase sponsorships by this percentage. But I would tell you that's kind of the easy aspect to goal setting for sponsorships. And you absolutely need goals aligning with sponsorships that are financial. Where's your growth going to come? How is that going to look? All of those need to happen. But for them to be strategic sponsorships to help you kind of elevate your organization to another level, your business to a growth profit as you need to have it, what I would tell you is you have to be very specific to those goals. And so what might one of those look like? Well, what does your chamber look like for the next 2 or 3 years? Where have you come from in the last 2 to say, this is where our chamber needs to change, or our chamber needs to grow, or our chamber needs to kind of solidify what we were doing in that aspect? Sponsorships do give those financial aspects to help us grow there, but we can align them to kind of set us up to get where we're going. And what do I mean by that is, depending upon the program, initiative, or event that you might have in your chamber, I effectively call them pie because I like some pie and I can remember that. But depending on what you have and aligning with those sponsorships, you can put sponsorship levels, you can put sponsorship tiers, you can put a different number of sponsorship kind of benefits and structures to get you to where you're wanting to go. If you've got a program, I'll use as an example, maybe a business solutions summit that you really feel like you need to be providing leadership resources to your small businesses. But right now you're currently at lunch and learns. And a lot of times, a lot of chambers we're going to, they're like, I'm kind of tired of having them. We have the same 5 people there. They're really not there to open a business. They're just there for the free sack lunch, and we don't know necessarily how to do it. Well, are you aligning your sponsorships in such a way that there might be sponsorships now for a lunch and learn, but are you changing benefits in maybe year 2 or 3 to then get you to a larger, more robust leadership conference in those regards? So some of those goals can be actually very kind of tactical at the benefit level to say we're going to use sponsorships to align growth in those regards. It might be an aspect of you saying, let's look at this strategically, and our goal is to have X number of members as sponsors. So many times we get on that hamster wheel of just going back to the same people that have always said yes because it's easy. We know they're going to say yes, and as staff, we get the dollars to meet the budget that the board will be happy with, and then we have to go plan and execute the event. And that just sounds exhausting because it is. It's what we do. But we know those few companies that are always going to say yes to make our life easier. But truly, the more members that we can get to sponsor, the more businesses that we can get to sponsor, the more engaged they are in our organization and what that looks like. And so it's kind of following the money in that particular regards. If we can get more businesses giving us additional dollars up and beyond our membership investment, then we know they are more solidified to our program of work, our strategic plan, and to our organization. So through that, do you have a goal of how many members you are going to increase via sponsorships? Quite frankly, do you know how many members who have routinely sponsored in the past? If I were to ask you on a phone call and say, well, how many members sponsored something in 21? Can you give that number real quick, or being able to find it rather quickly without a whole lot of investigation? Keeping that number in front of you is important because it will help solidify additional engagement. And so those are some goal metrics to look at. So once you've kind of taken that time and set forth, okay, how are we going to use sponsorships to help us grow? What I would tell you is it becomes very evident very quickly that you're going to have to get rid of the way you've always done things. You're going to have to do it a little differently. Just taking the time sometimes is doing it differently in that particular aspect. So we have to kind of embrace this mentality that life's going to look a little different for us. Timing is going to look a little different for us. I've heard from a number of chambers here in kind of the first quarter into second quarter of 22, and they've said, we really didn't have time to think about much of anything through 2020 and 2021, but we kind of get this sense of a little bit of normalcy coming back, but really just kind of this time to take a breath. And so now is the time to kind of look and see how we can align strategic sponsorships to best affect our organization. Others would tell us, and quite frankly, just laugh that other chambers have that, not in a bad way, but in kind of a selfish way of, I wish I had time because now I'm busier more than ever. So how am I going to find that? Well, we have to get through the aspect that we haven't always done it. So how much more are we going to look at it? So once we find that time, once we say, okay, this is probably going to look different, we have to start getting some aspects of what are our sponsorship plan? How do we offer sponsorships and what do we do? Throughout our kind of opportunities that we get across the country looking at chambers, I would say that there's really 4 different ways, and I'm behind the slide there, so 4 different ways to have sponsorship plans, 4 different types, if you will. First, and I would say none of them are bad. It's each unique to your community and to your organization. So I don't necessarily think one's better than the other. It's what fits you in that particular process. And so what I would say is the first is kind of going program to program, event to event, asking for sponsorships. And we're just kind of on this wheel or this step ladder every month of the year, kind of asking for sponsorships for the next thing that's coming up. I would say probably by and large, most chambers are in that cycle of getting sponsors as they go along. Another type is what we call annual sponsorship, I was going to say the word drive, and that's not necessarily it, but kind of an annual thought process of sponsorships. And really what that is a chamber will think collectively for kind of maybe 12 months, maybe 6 months. We've seen some half of a year, compile all the opportunities together, put together a very nice brochure, kind of put everything out, and then they kind of send it out. Some chambers will send it out with the membership due invoice when those come up. The majority that elect to do this plan will typically send those out in November, December, regardless of when membership is due for that particular business. But they just send it out in mass to the membership saying, these are all the opportunities for the aforementioned period of time. Where would you like to engage? And so they kind of get that out there. The third type would be chambers putting sponsorships in their tiered dues. And so that's part of the benefits of those tiered dues there. And so that's how they take care of sponsorships, is it's kind of one-in-one with membership tiers in that particular aspect. The fourth would be what we do day in and day out, and that's total resource campaigns. That is where sponsors, it is kind of a 12-month period in selling sponsorships, but you utilize a group of volunteers to go out to produce a competitive market to get sponsors, and typically a larger number in that particular case. But any of those would be a way to get sponsors. And so in determining which of those that you have is really the base point, because you have to then think through, while we know how we might go out to get sponsorships, we then kind of have to break down what that plan is to how can we realign how we're doing that to yield better results, to get more out of the picture. And part of that comes with organizing your team. And now you go, Jason, my team is me. I've got one staffer. It's me. I totally understand. I sympathize with you. My first chamber, I had 33 members. So I very much get the aspect that it's just you. But regardless of the plan that you share, what I would tell you is you have to think through, how are you going to organize these people? How are you going to let them know what's available? We talk with many business members of chambers throughout the year, and it is quite frequent that a number of them will say, it's like they don't even know what they're doing down there, honestly, Jason, at the chamber. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? And sometimes for maybe a larger staff, maybe you have 3 on staff, 5, maybe you have 30 in that regards. A lot of the times we operate in these silos of what we do. And so let's just say that we have a leadership program and a staffer over that. Well, they're thinking about sponsorships for their leadership program. And then we have events, and maybe the signature events have a staffer. And so annual meetings coming up, and somebody's thinking about those sponsorships. And then, we have a public policy staffer, and they're thinking about the Washington Flying and how to get sponsors there. Often we will talk to a member business that said, I got 2 or 3 calls in one day for chamber sponsorships. They were all individual of each other, calling this bank, this utility company, this community college, this hospital, whoever it might be, to say, hey, will you sponsor this? Because I know you always have. But we have to think about how that looks to the member in that regard. The member is seeing 3 calls from the chamber. They don't understand the silos by which we operate in staff. So they're thinking chamber staff aren't talking to each other, because wouldn't it have been better if they just approached and said, we are looking for sponsorships comprehensively. Where would you like to play in this particular regard? So sometimes the organization of our team is just organizing our staff to say, when are we making calls? How are we making calls? And to whom are we making those calls? Because we want it to be a great member interaction in that place. Some of you might have committees that are set up, or task force, or whatever word you want to call in that particular aspect, to where they are raising money for whatever program or event that they are kind of over in that committee. We really have to do a better job than just telling them, hey, we need to go raise $5,000 for the annual meeting. Go hit up your friends. because a lot of the time it is just that. It is just the hit up of friends. I remember one time in my very last chamber before I came to the YGM side of the chamber world, I was talking to a member and she said, I was early at my time at that chamber. I was talking to members and seeing what they thought about the chamber and those type of things. And she said, Jason, she said, I just don't feel like the chamber's run like a business and that we have a plan to view as businesses. She said, because honestly, she said, I've served on the committee. I've even done it myself. But what I feel like often happens is as a committee member, we get a charge to go raise some funds. And she says, my friends will come to me as my business and say, hey, don't you want to sponsor this for the chamber? She said, I love the chamber and I'm always going to support it. And I might sponsor that because of who asked me in that regard. Maybe not necessarily even listening to, was it the golf tournament or the annual meeting, but it was because of who asked me. And she said, before long, a couple of months go by and somebody else that's a friend or maybe a client of ours, or she said, in our community, it might be somebody, she was a wedding venue. And she said, it might be somebody that I know is about to have a wedding. And I'm using this in a relationship build that, they'll have the wedding here in that particular aspect. She said, and they'll ask for something else and I'll do it. And she said, then comes along the fall and somebody else comes to me and asked me, and she said, this would have been far better for the marketing of our company than the other two. One, I didn't know it was coming. Two, the other people that had asked didn't know it was coming, so they couldn't tell me about it. There was just no comprehensive nature in the plan. And so when I say that, it kind of goes back to the way we've always done it. Have we looked at our sponsorships in a comprehensive plan and put ourselves in our members' shoes of making business decisions? The more information they have, the better. But it's going to take you time to develop it. And so in that case, we have to find it in that regard. So as you maybe look at some of those other potential plans that you have, whether it's committee structure, whether it's a TRC and doing volunteers, you've got to communicate that to a larger base to say, this is what we're doing. But I would say more than what we're doing, you have to. I think it's a must. Underline, big capitals, bolded in orange color, of course. But what I would tell you is I think it's a big must that you let people know why they are sponsoring. And it's not to help the chamber. It's not to give you more revenue. We have this nature. We have this kind of response of feeling like everybody in the community really believes in us and wants the greater good. And I would say most of the time that's true for the majority of people. But when businesses are sponsoring, especially when you get beyond those ones that have always sponsored, the hospitals and the banks and the larger employers, when you're getting down to the small and medium-sized companies, they want an ROI. They want something that they can see as an investment to their business. If all we're ever saying for sponsorships is that it helps the chamber and we need more money to do this and that, we're really not speaking to our members appropriately. Because what we have to think through is really what sponsorship is. And a lot of the times our team doesn't even know that. Sometimes our staff is just about looking at it. Maybe if they're a commission-based salesperson and they are looking at sponsorships, and maybe that connecting dot hasn't come, especially if it gets to a committee and a volunteer role. What we have to align is that our sponsorships are our chamber's products and services that we are selling to our customers. Think about it in business terms. Every business that is a member of your chamber has a product and service. And every business that has a product and service, i.e. every one of them, or they're not a business in that regard, needs to get that product and service to a target market. Either a target market that they're trying to break through because they've got a new product or service that they're wanting a new group of people to find out about. Maybe it's an existing target market that they are trying to protect and not let competitors kind of poach off of. Regardless of the reason, they have a product or service to get to a target market. Let's put that in chamber lingo. Our products and services at the chamber are sponsorships. It's just the name. I'll be honest, I say it every day of my life, and I don't like the word sponsorships because now there is this connotation because all the nonprofits use it, other organizations use it, schools use it, and so it's kind of this philanthropic give. But at the chamber, our sponsorship should be aligned to a target market. We should know what that target market is so that when we go sell it to our customer, i.e. our member, we can tell them that this product and service allows them to get to a target market. And so through that, you have to organize your team in such a way that they know what those target markets are and how to sell that in a marketing and advertising way, in a product and service way, not just in a donation way. A donation way is the worst kind of sponsorship that you can get because there isn't this expecting of an ROI. So the retention of that sponsorship is not going to be high at all. So once you kind of have the vernacular down and once you kind of have the plan down, a lot of it comes to really the next thing is your inventory. What does your inventory look like? How is it going to sell? What's going to be included into it? A lot of different capacities come into your inventory. Now, what I would tell you with inventory is a lot of it is that it has to be fresh. A lot of it is there has to be some varied representation in your inventory. It has to be different. There has to be some scalability there. I've mentioned over the last couple of years, and maybe some of you have heard it. I know we've had a number of new chamber professionals on the call as well. So I think it bears repeating. You don't want your sponsorships to get stale. You don't want your products and services to get stale. I often equate it to a candy bar that has a lot of dust in a convenience store. Not buying that there. It's been there a while. Candy bars in convenience stores are placed to move. And if they have an inch of dust on it, they've been there a while. You have to look at your sponsorships. You have to look at your inventory. Are we doing the same thing over and over again? People kind of equate that to, is the chamber working? I will tell you in early 2020, kind of January, February, before COVID really hit in that regard, we were working with a chamber who in 2020 had in their benefit structure the benefit of faxing all of their 850 members. I'll let you sit with that one for a while because I sat with it for a minute. Truly, they were selling faxes. Now, I'm not telling you that faxes still don't work. I know the medical profession deals a lot still with faxes, and there's some segments, but membership at large doesn't. I would say the majority of your members don't have faxes. And so what did that tell the member who looked at that sponsorship inventory? That hadn't been updated in a while, so they're probably not doing a good job at fulfillment of that. And so through that process, you have to look at your inventory. Your inventory's got to move. Your inventory's got to change. It's what happens in stores with products and services and the way they look at it. So through that particular process, what I would tell you is as you look at your inventory, also, how are you displaying that inventory to your members? Are you talking to them about inventory that gets them to the target markets that they desired? Are we even kind of threading kind of benefits through our inventory so that they complement each other? Their pricing looks together. How does that inventory truly look? Now, depending on the plan that you have, that inventory is going to probably look a little different. If you are selling kind of month by month or event to event, you're going to constantly be looking at inventory. I would tell you in that word time, you might not have as much time going event to event to really comprehensively look at it. But I would tell you is you'll get a sense of, does this event, does this program look to be completely the same as it did 5 years ago? If it does, you've got to start making some changes just to the perceived value. Because I will tell you, an underlying benefit of sponsorship, it's not the value itself, it's the perceived value. And there's something vastly different in both of them. Because if our members are looking at our sponsorship inventory to get to a target market, they're going to be changing in what that is, but there's also the perception of what is the value of me getting in front of that group. So a lot of times that pricing is on perceived value of our inventory, not the actual value. And so a lot of that, as it comes forward and we begin to think through it, not only is our inventory, now inventory is just like any other business. I think you can tell already kind of halfway through here in the last 30 minutes, I'm overlaying a lot of business words to our sponsorships. I'm overlaying a lot of what we learned in business in high school and potentially college into an aspect of the chamber world, because we have to begin to talk to our business members in language that they understand. And if they're businesses, we have to talk to them about target markets and products and services, supply and demand, competitive marketplace, all of those things, because that's our products and services. It's our sales. It's our pricing. Yes, the end result is about money. That's every business in the world, is it not? At some point, a business is to make money. Now, the question is always what they do with that money and how that works there. But the end result is to make money, and we're no different in that regard. So we have to start looking at our inventory, everything that we're doing. Are we just selling sponsorships for events? Have we moved it to programs and initiatives and our leadership programs and our workforce pieces, our education pieces, our public policy initiatives? All of those can potentially have sponsorships. We have to have a plan that they affect each other. And one of the greatest places that they affect each other, honestly, is in pricing. Now, an overwhelming majority of chambers here do exactly what I talk about right here at the law of fives. Now, what's the law of fives? It's a good phrase to say what I price things, or I see chambers price things at, of 100, 250, 500, 750, 1,000, 1,500, 2,500, 5,000, 7,500, 10,000. For long, we sound like an auctioneer. It's just this repetitive, ongoing thing. Why do we price things that way? Well, we go back to a few slides ago. We always have. Every organization in our community prices things that way. And those price points tell our members, without us saying a word, that this is more of a donation than it is a business purchase. Why? Because every other organization prices that way. When you look at it via your business community with your business lens on, you will find that none of your businesses price that way. They price extraordinarily different. Now, am I telling you to price everything at $3.99, $4.99, just mark it up and call it a sale type thing? No, I wouldn't go that far in that regard. But there is perceived value in things. We have to look at it in a way of, what is this value? How does this operate? What does this look like? If you are in the aspect of having $100, $250, $500, $750, I'm going to tell you, you are pricing that you're just pricing it wrong, in my opinion. I don't know how to say it. I was going to try to come up with a word and there's not there. Why? Because if I am a chamber member that is looking and I have 100, 250, 500, if I've got 100, I've really got 500. But those benefits are going to have to be so vastly different to get me off of the 100. And we're going to talk about levels of sponsorships here in a minute. But since we're talking about pricing, what I'm going to tell you is your pricing says a lot about your plan. And so through that process, you have to get off of just that ease of pricing things the way they've always been priced. We've got to look at what's the access to the target market, what's the benefit, what's the cost value proposition that we have as a chamber and what we're going to get there. Where's the value of the marketing that comes with that? Pre and post event, pre and post initiative in that regard. All of that comes to a pricing structure. And when we begin to price it accordingly, you're going to find that the value for that sponsorship increases greatly to your members because they view it differently in that particular aspect. Now, I'm going to tell you this. I firmly believe this, and this is kind of really the crux of pricing sponsorships. It's really also kind of pricing your budget. Depending on how you were pre-COVID, once COVID hit, there were a number of chambers that were really in panic mode about how they were going to continue with financing because they had financed a little differently in that process. What I would tell you is I believe fiscally responsible chambers budget on program hard cost and allow sponsorships to be the lagniappe. Now, I had to throw a little Louisiana culture in there. For those of you that might not know lagniappe, it is a Creole word that means a little something extra. So when you begin to think through that, what I believe, and a lot of chambers that we go into don't do this. It's just not a process that they have done in the past because they've always done it that way. But what happened, I think, at the beginning of 2020, when COVID hit and people had to really look at this, so much of their budget, whether it was a program, whether it was an initiative, whether it was an event, was based on the sponsorship that came in, that when people started pulling sponsorships, then they had a budget issue. If you begin to look at every program, initiative, and event that you do, And if you will structure it in a budget way that event, that program, that initiative can be executed just by the participation cost, by the programming hard cost, then all of the sponsorship can be extra money for you to do whatever you need to do in your organization, whether it's add an additional staff person, maybe it's new technology. Maybe in the world that we're living in, you have to buy a whole bunch of gadgets for video components. Maybe it's social, maybe it's webinars, those type of things. There have been a couple of chambers when they've realigned their budgeting here. I know they have kind of socked some money away for a number of years, and that was their building fund. They didn't have to go into a capital outlay plan. That's just not what they wanted to do in that regard. So you've got to begin to look at the budgeting aspect. You can only do that pre the event, pre the programming, in planning, and going, okay, what's our hard cost? Where are we? I'll take something just in case, maybe a little of this is abstract, but to kind of give you some tactical things to take away. Yeah, we talk about annual meeting, we talk about golf tournament, all of this works, but how does that work in programming? What I would say is take your leadership program. So many times we will ask chambers, what are the hard costs for your leadership program? They'll tell us about meals every day. They'll tell us about the drive-in they do to their state capitol to teach that session on state governance. They'll talk about all the hard costs. Some do t-shirts, some do polo shirts, some do disc training, and there's cost that comes with that. Whatever those hard costs are, they will enumerate that for us and say, okay, this is how much it costs per person. And then I'll ask them what their tuition rate is, and it's half that. There's just kind of a pause. It's like, well, how do you not make it eat more? Well, the costs have to outweigh that. Now, some chambers go, I just can't do that in my community. If you can't do that, then the question becomes, is there really value to it? That's a hard look in the mirror. If you can't get enough to cover your cost, is there value to it? Might you need to do it every other year? Might you need to realign it? Maybe you don't do the field trips. Maybe you look more towards the professional development. There's some things to look at. But if you can't cover the cost, it tells you something about the members' perceived value of that event. Same thing with the annual meeting. You enumerate all of your costs, your food, your table rentals, your linen, your awards, your centerpieces, everything that you can possibly think of, and you come up with this cost. And you go, well, if I divide that by the number of people that typically come to something, my people won't pay that. There's a question mark there. We kind of have to have some real hard conversations with ourselves when it comes to sponsorships so that we can provide what we need to provide. And a lot of the times in providing it, we have to reassess what it looks like, because the perceived value currently might not be what our members are judging, or they're judging it on the current perceived value, not what it should be. What I mean by that, I can't tell you how many times I see this. A slide, thanks to all our sponsors. And there's all of these logos up here. Call that logo soup, people, and it don't taste very good. It don't taste good to a lot of people. Business logos have extreme value to that business. They want to see their logo over just their name. If that's the case, make them pay for it. Let's say that this sample slide was all of our sponsors. One of them paid a lot more than the other. Well, they're just lost in that. Before long, our brain shuts off looking at stuff, and then they just go, okay, I'm not going to look through all that. That's just a hodgepodge of mess in that regard. So through that particular aspect, what you have to begin to think through is, how can we give value that aligns to our cost? How can we even begin to look at it? Now, of all of those, you see Mr. John on there. I put that in there just for the aspect to remember to tell you the story. We are known often for telling a porta potty sponsor or two, selling a porta potty sponsor, which Mr. John is a company of, or a potty sponsor at a golf tournament and those type of things. And people go, well, Jason, aren't you just kind of trying to sell everything in a NASCAR style? Not necessarily. I firmly believe there are some things you should not sponsor. But when you do potty, yeah, it's kind of fun, Porta John. But what you're looking at is you're getting members who have not sponsored anything before being able to come in. You have urologists, you have occupational medicine companies because they do drug testing. You have janitorial services. You have a lot of different companies. At a golf tournament before, I've seen a bank that said, make your deposits here. Figure out how that. So fun. Banks had that at one community that I know of for 7 years because everybody talks about it. We've had a cell phone repair company. Your sponsorships should be talking about getting a larger reach to new members, not necessarily new members to your chamber, but new members to your sponsorships because they've never gone up and beyond that sponsorship before. And so part of that is what I have to say is really, as you kind of align your plan here and you begin to strategically think about it, you go, okay, this is how we're going to sell it. This is the team that's going to sell it. Okay, we're going to get the products going and we kind of know the overall programming that we're going to sell. We know that there's some pricing to it. The biggest kind of trip up for a lot of chambers, if I'm honest with you, really becomes in the level of sponsorships because we hear so many different things out there. We get to an aspect of, we hear that it needs to be individualized and just one of ones for people, or we hear there's this hierarchy and people call it different things and it's gold, silver, bronze, or whatever. I will tell you, I think it's both. If I'm just truly honest with you and what we see that sells across the country. When you look at a potty sponsor, it's one of one. While there's multiple companies that could fit that, you can only put so many logos over the John in that regard. And so through that process, there's value to just being one. And so as you look at your programming and as you look at your events, I think you having some different levels that are just exclusive, one of ones will really be attractive to some businesses. But I will also tell you that there are other businesses that aren't necessarily looking for that. They're looking to be part of the collective good. They're looking for additional benefits. And so having some tiered structure in your benefits where people can kind of pay at different levels to get different things is very important. I think you look at it as kind of a retail aspect. I'm an Apple user versus an Android. I don't know if you can tell or not, but we love orange at YGM. It's our corporate colors. I would love an orange iPhone. They don't make them. At this point, I can get, space gray, a rose gold, a silver, and a gold, I think. Okay, I buy it. I want an orange bad enough, but I'm not bad enough that I'm going to change products. So what do? I buy a cover and stick over it. Apple knows that. This is what they're going to offer, buy it or not. Same thing for you. You can't do all sponsorships being very individualistic. You don't have enough staff time to do that. You don't have enough volunteers if you use them. You don't have enough opportunities to do that. So a collective mix of both really helps you kind of get a robust planning. But what it also helps you do is begin to find more and more of what those levels are. Kind of this level thing is what I was talking about even in pricing. If we have $100 and $250 and $500, or let's change it up. Let's do $250, $500, and $750. $250 can afford $750. They do it all the time. But it's what you have as the benefits that make that level more attractive. If you take those three, $250, $500, $750, most of the time people would pick the $500 because they were going to spend anyway, but they're not going to be at the bottom. Maybe they don't want to spend as much as the top, so they're going to go for the middle. But if the difference in the bottom and the middle is only that they're going to be mentioned on your website, there's not enough value in that. I will tell you, a lot of our membership CRMs make it easy enough that we can put, kind of everybody on our website. You shouldn't. Absolutely, you should not. Why? It's so easy. It's just a check of a button, Jason. It gives them value. But does it give them perceived value? See, that's the difference right there. Yes, it could give them value, but do they find the value to be on your website? Because what I would suggest to you is a number of them could care less. Would they take it? Absolutely. Are they going to tell you, oh, no, you don't have to do that for me? No, they're not. They'll take it, but it's not enough value to make them increase that cost of the item. But what it definitely does by you putting everybody on there, it decreases the value of those top sponsors because now they're crowded around everybody else. It's different if I only see 2 or 3 logos and that's it versus 2 or 3 logos and a whole bunch of smaller logos and a whole bunch of text. It just begins to be a boggled mess in my mind in that regard. So you have to be careful when you come to the level of sponsorships, truly what you're putting in those levels of benefit vastly make a difference in those regards. So this is kind of the end of developing the plan, because now once we've thought about the levels of sponsorships and what those benefits and all, we've got a product that's ready to sell. We've got a product that's ready for market. And so through that, well, then what's the next aspect of sales? Well, if we've developed a product, now we have to get it to market. Who is our market? And that's, again, where we have to make a strategic decision. Are we just calling the people that we've always called before to make an easy buck so that we make the budget and we can move on? Or are we trying to make it a little bit more solid to them that they appreciate the purchase to help them grow their company, and they're looking for something, kind of a way for the chamber to be a tool that they can use to grow their business? And so if we are going to take it to market, if we're going to take it to businesses, to our customers, we have to think like they're thinking. And so often, more often than not, it's just that, hey, do you want to be this level? Because I've already kind of thought through it for you. This is where I think you might fit. But honestly, psychology teaches us a little different. I have loved this pyramid for a while. I'll be honest, I didn't pay too close of attention in my education aspect about this until I got to the real world and realized the value of this. And you all might recognize it as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, it is about a personal thing, but what I've learned is it's also a business thing. There are a group of businesses that are worried about physiological and safety needs. For their business, it's just about operating. It's about turning a profit. It's about their employees and how does that work? It becomes really a core structure to take care of these 2 levels. Once they have kind of maintained that and taken care of it, then they kind of go on to, love and belonging and esteem in the community. They want their peers to respect them. They want the community at large to see them as a corporate partner. And of course, after some time, they get to the top of that pyramid and they are just great corporate citizens. I will be honest with you. I feel that most of the people that we go to as chambers are up here because they understand the greater good. They're not necessarily looking for somebody back and forth and, going in that aspect of ROI for them in those particular aspects. So once we think about our businesses, our target markets in this aspect, what I would tell you is I want you to take it one step further. I want you to think about where they are in their business in that aspect. Are they starting up? Did you have a number of companies that started up during COVID and entrepreneurship and all of that? How many new businesses do you have in the last couple of years? Is the business at a point where they are willing and ready to grow and then expand? There is a difference in that particular aspect. And then we get to a sense of maturity. When you look at businesses at where they are, it helps us align so much more what our inventory needs to be for them, maybe what level. And I would tell you more than anything, I think it goes to an aspect of when you overlay all of this, I think we really get a sense of how we can approach our members, because when we have what they need, we know where they are in the company. So now we kind of have 2 ways to begin to look here in that particular aspect. You have businesses that are at that base level. They're probably in the startup mode, or post-COVID, they could have been ready to do the growth, but COVID took them back down to startup because just of what COVID did at any particular level. Once we get this sense of who we are, honestly, it makes talking to them so much easier because we can talk to them about where they are and what target audiences they're really wanting to attract. I have to tell a story in an aspect. It was at my last chamber, and as we started selling sponsorships in a different way, one of the very first sponsorships that ever sold for me was a $4,500 sponsorship to a home and garden show. It was a new event for us, and it was somebody that I would have never expected. It would have not been one of these maturity. It was actually right between growth and expansion. He was an insurance company. He had been in business about 5 years. He had a small staff, and he was really ready to kind of grow to that next level. And he said, I am ready to invest to show this community where I am as a company. I'm going to be here for a long time. I'm not going anywhere. This community has been good to us. It's a different way than my competitors are advertising, but I've been far more strategic with it. I was able to have that conversation because I knew where he was in the company in those particular aspects. So we have to begin to think through that when we are taking the product to our customers. It's not just, okay, this is what often chambers do. And I say that because I was guilty of it at 3 chambers. It's like, okay, I need for my budget X number of dollars. I've got this many levels, and so I just need this many. Or, hey, if 3 people will buy the top level, then I'm done and I can move on. If I'm honest, I really did not care about the kind of implementation factor, the deliverability, because I just needed to budget and move on to the next thing. But honestly, as we take this to market and as we begin to align this, the implementation is what's going to make them come back. Not only come back, but honestly spend more money when they come back, because did they get what we promised them? Did they get what they needed to get to the target market that they should have or that they desired? Because a lot of the times that's what we have to look at. Is our sponsorship just fluff? Is it just saying, hey, you're going to get your logo here, your logo there? Is it saying you're just going to get on the website and you're just going to get an email, but not thinking through what the end user is? And so in that implementation, I'll take an example. A lot of times we'll offer to chambers to do registration sponsorships or hospitality or guest services or whatever name you want to do with that. And that is truly at an event or a program where there is attendance, somebody sponsoring that area. If you're not doing it, hopefully you'll walk away with that nugget. Because truly, when we think about that, there are businesses that only want that sponsorship. Why? Because they have the perceived value that they're going to shake everybody's hand that walks in first. Everybody's going to see them when they walk in. That is what they're buying. So in that buying, if I cloud this sponsorship with website and email and everything else, they'll take it. But they would have bought it just for what they wanted in that regard. So once they buy it, I have to then make sure I implement that. Y'all know that. It's easy. But when we start thinking differently, it's not as easy as just checking a box to make sure that they go on a website. We have to make sure we've reached out to them. They know what time to show up. We go and say, who's going to help check in? Which one of your staffers are going to maybe work the line in those type of cases? And how does that look? And so there is some work to it. But once it's implemented like that, do you really think they're ever going to let that go? No, not until their target market changes, that's for sure, because they have the perception that everybody saw them and their competitors did not. Now, let's take that exact same example and see where you really make it shine, and that's in the over-delivering of sponsorships. Now, notice I said, for this registration sponsor, maybe they get to help check in, maybe somebody can work the line, those type of things, and that's what was promised to them in that sponsorship. What was not promised is that everybody that checks in can use their pens, their writing pens in that regard. That doesn't have to be a benefit that we put out, but if there's a whole stack of writing pens that somebody's going to check in or do whatever, what's going to happen? They're going to walk away. People are going to keep them. There's just that additional value that comes to this sponsor that goes, wow, I didn't pay for that. That they over delivered for me in that particular process. Now, I will tell you, there is a word of caution when it comes to over delivering. When you over deliver, you have to make sure it doesn't affect other sponsors. And what I mean by that is, let's say that you promised a presenting sponsor, a top sponsorship, something that was exclusive. But then maybe that sponsorship didn't sell. And so at the next level, you gave everybody else that particular benefit. Well, we can't do that. because the word exclusive means only one. Also, then we've set the expectation that all of these second level people will get that, and then they're going to want it next year. But if the top sponsorship sells, then we're going to have a little bit of mucky water. And you can say all day long, oh, I would let them know. I would talk them through it. You know good and well your members don't have a memory for next week, much less next year at the same event, but they're going to remember that particular benefit. They're not going to know why they got it. They're not going to remember that. So you're going to have to do some re-education there, and it can get sticky. So you're careful in your over-delivering, but in that aspect, you can over where it can make a value in that particular process. So through all of that, as you look at it and comprehensively deliver it, then you're starting over again through strategic processes of how to do sponsorships for the next program or the next initiative when it comes up again. Yeah, I know all of this process takes some time. I know finding time is worse than finding gold for you, but it will pay off huge dividends if we just take the time to implement it, because what then will happen is it gets easier and easier year after year as we implement whatever plan we do to sell sponsorships. And we have some data that can be used to increase some sponsorship dollars, some funding, maybe some benefits didn't work, but we have the plan to go for from that particular aspect. So with that being said, and close to 4 minutes till 1 for some of you, and then us Central Time folks in Illinois and here in Arkansas till noon, I'm going to pause and see if there was any questions, Lisa, that we might can address.
Yes, there were. So we had one question. Actually, it looks like somebody answered it, but
Kristen's been trying to get me
go ahead. David, did you want to ask your question out loud? Here's the question. Multiple years in multiple sales, in membership sales, but first time in sponsorship sales. When pitching sponsorship, is less more or is more more? Meaning giving them all the details, data, and examples, or don't overwhelm them with info if they already have an idea of what they want to sponsor?
Get ready for a fun answer, because I'm going to say there's not one. The answer to that really comes with knowing the person and reading that person. If David's had multiple years of membership sales, he understands that in selling membership. You know, is this person more interested in networking? So I need to talk to them about that, maybe leave our public policy off. As you get going in sponsorship sales, it's the same way. Some marketing people for businesses are very detail oriented. They want to know where their logo is going to be at every given moment, and, you know, all of these details behind it. If they're the point of purchase, if they're the one making that decision. But others, if it's a smaller business, maybe if it's the CEO of a company, maybe they're not as detailed. They want the larger picture. They want to say, this is how many people you're getting in front of. This is the target market for your growth. We'll take care of it. So it's really reading that person. I would definitely not. Now, the question is always, well, if I don't know this person, how do I read them and how does that work? You know, it takes some practice, but I would always start with kind of some questioning about what they're looking for, what audience they're trying to get in. Again, if you start using words as target audiences and products and services and marketing and advertising rather than sponsorships, they're going to see you differently. They're going to talk a little bit more. I think it's like everything in sales. Begin to ask the questions first and then feed to the details as it answers. I will also say there is nothing wrong with giving them information and then saying, let me send you some follow-up details, so you don't have to have it all with you, but it gives you another touch point after you get back to the office.
Thank you, Jason. I would just add, at least for my conference, we have 2 different documents. We kind of have like a brief one pager with a graph that looks really cool. And then we have a more detailed spelled out document. So then depending on what we're doing, if I'm seeing somebody in person, is what we do.
And I would absolutely say, going back to the slide of here, a lot of it depends on the type of company that you're going to. You know, if you are going to a startup, they're probably not going to have a lot of time to look at any details in that regard. So you've got to hit them quick. Most of the time, companies that are here in this regard right here, wow, I'll get my fingers right here in a minute. And these bottom 2 levels, You might not even have time to meet with them. It might be sending a prospectus with them because they're going to make a decision between 12 and 2 a.m. when the business is closed, and they can kind of think a little differently. So a lot of it is dependent upon, I think, this slide of where they are, who they are in the company, and where that business actually is to the information that you give them. Absolutely. But I will say to your point, Lisa, the fact that you already have those documents created, you have them ready. I think that's important for chambers, that we're not waiting to create them once we get back. We might have to tweak them, but we've got some sense that we're just going to send it when we get back.
And then what do you think about somebody who looks at it and says, I'm really looking for this kind of benefit, or I'm really looking to only spend this kind of money? And so creating sponsorship packages on the fly. What's your opinion on that?
What I would say is it really depends on then the plan that you do. Are you selling program to program and event to event? Do you have it comprehensively laid out that where you can kind of pivot one way or the other? I think you've got to be in that realm. If you're selling just event to event, it's hard to pivot on the fly that way, to go, well, I'm only looking at this, or I'm looking for that target market, because maybe you haven't fleshed out what your chamber schedule looked like in the fourth quarter, and here we sit in the second quarter. So having that more information, what I can tell you from what we talk to businesses more often than not, what we hear from the businesses is when they say, I don't have it in the budget, or I hadn't planned it, it's really just an excuse. It's an easy one that we kind of go, oh, okay, we understand that, move on. And they know that. That's why they use it. I mean, we've talked to a number of businesses, and I will specifically ask them, when you say this, is it accurate? And then they kind of just do the little sheepish eye and go, no, it really wasn't. We just didn't want to do it, but couldn't tell them no in that regard because they were the chamber or whatever. So I would say dig a little bit deeper, go a little bit deeper. When it's an audience, you have to think about it. Now, I will tell you what chambers are kind of notorious for. And that's the aspect of saying, oh, well, we'll make something up for you, or, oh, we'll make it work for you, or, oh, I want this. We need to be very guarded against the quick knee-jerk reaction of, oh, yes, we can do that just for the dollar. Because we really need to be able to take that back and go, how does this affect our overall program, our overall event? Because if while we're talking to somebody and we've already enumerated our benefits, we know what our level is, and somebody will come in here and go, this is what we want. Sometimes that lure of money sitting there goes, yes. But we haven't thought through, does it affect the other levels? Did I just devalue the other levels because let's be honest, we're the chamber. And most people worth their grain of salt. If we're in a staff sales position, having a conversation with a member, they're going to try to negotiate with us. They think we're the flea market, where we came in at 500. They think they might can get it for 250. And if they can't get it for 250, they just want more stuff added to the 500. We have to be careful how that affects the overall picture in that regard. So what I have learned to do most of the time in those particular negotiations is, let me come back, let me go see what we've got. Maybe I'll get back with you, those type of things. I'm very cautious to just do that immediate answer. So many times we feel like we have to have the answer when it's it's a good thought. Let me go back and see if that will fit with what we're doing. Sometimes they'll be very quick to go, oh, well, no, we'll just go ahead and take it. But other times we're able to go back. And then when we can authentically say, I'm sorry, that just doesn't work. Now that's at this level. If you would like to bump up or those type of things, sometimes that helps. We as chamber people just have to be guarded against. We don't have to say yes immediately all the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I don't see any other questions. If anybody has one, either go ahead and drop it at the Q&A. We are at 12:04, so if we don't have any more, we're going to let you all, or 1:04 for all of you.
Whichever way. We're at a 4.
We're at 04 at past the hour. I don't see anything else in the chat. Again, we will be sending out a recording of this to those who have registered. Jason, thank you so much for your time. This has been just as well received as I hope it was back in 20. Oh, we've got one more from somebody who wouldn't have been with us in 2020. Okay. How do you recommend chambers develop their price package offering? Look at media, or is there a baseline recommendation?
For us, there is no baseline recommendation. We get this question honestly a whole lot because it's what we spend our time in. Back in 21, we were sharing an example of a chamber that had taken a lot of new steps for some Facebook grouping, and due to their pricing and due to their sponsorships and taking it to the community, they raised $30,000-$40,000 just off that one Facebook group. And so immediately the question for everybody was, tell us their levels, tell us what they priced. And I wouldn't. And a lot of times there was this kind of, are you holding it back? Well, I'm not, because for them and the way they priced it, it was affecting other things. So if you got this sponsorship level, you were also in front of their annual meeting. And if you were here, you were part of their leadership program, but an email could feed back through here. So it was very comprehensive. And I will say that is where I kind of have to bite my nails sometimes with chambers, as I understand how free we are with information. I'm a recovering chamber executive, will be for all of my life. And so there were a number of chambers. I always asked, hey, can't you send me something and all of that? We have to be very careful at guarding against just replicating other people's money. And what I mean by that is the price level, because what works in their community might not work what works in our community. What we put in as benefits might not be there. So authentically, to give that person the truest answer of how do you price, it's a process. You truly have to look at the components of your benefits. Are they going on social? Are they not? How much is that social worth do you feel in that regard? The best place to always start is where you currently are. I mean, that's the process that we use day in and day out is, okay, what is your email blast getting right now? Okay, what have you gotten here in this particular? And so you kind of have a baseline with that. So that's where I say start, but then beginning to think, okay, if we put this on our social page and we've got 2,000 people, or if we've got 200, that perceived value is going to have to go a little bit there. So I know that seems like to not be an answer, and I don't mean it to be that way. I just am really saying there's a process there. It's not just a, hey, check these boxes and you've got a price. And I'll also say this, every one of your sponsorships should not sell. And that's hard for chamber people. We want to sell everything. If we've priced it accordingly, or if we're even having trouble in pricing, having some various levels there, when we go to offer it, it will begin to tell us what our pricing should be. If this sells out, but this does not, did we reach too high? What was going on? If all of our top stuff sold out, but our bottom did not, maybe we didn't have enough benefits there. So sponsorships should be made to give you that information that you need to know. So at some point, you just have to start. The first year, you might not have it the best in the world in pricing, but it gives you some price points to go forward in that regard. But it is truly a process. And I don't mean to say that just to get out of answering it. We just never give a checklist in that regard because it takes some thought to really get it right. And I will say that is just when you say your businesses, it's the same thing. I remember when an iPhone was $99. Now, we only wish it was $99. And so they didn't start at this level. The product grew with it. Pricing, demand grew with it in that case. Every business that you have in your membership does the same thing. They all put out a price, they try it, and then they tweak it based on the benefits that come. So unfortunately, that is the hardest part and is the most time consuming.
Well, thank you, Jason. We are at 8 after the hour. When we send out that recording, we'll have Jason's information in it. So if anybody wants to reach out, I imagine, Jason, chambers can work with you to develop plans. And there you see it all on the screen, but we'll also put it in a separate,
absolutely,
in the email with the recording. And I want to thank everybody for their time today. Thank you, Jason, for sharing your expertise with us as always. Thank y'all for the invite, Lisa. Y'all have a great day and we'll chat soon. Wonderful. Thanks, everybody.